Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. So it's very appropriate, and I was very excited to bring on as our next guest, Marvin Storm, who hosts a podcast called Business Exit Stories and is a very well-established professional in talking about deal makers, transactions, and over the course of the past 8+ years on Get Down to Business, I've heard some of those stories, but I know, Marvin, you have a front row seat to hearing from some of the most interesting M&A advisors, investment bankers, business brokers who share the, as you say, the good, bad, and some of the most unusual transactional deal stories that you can imagine. So, Marvin, welcome to the program.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Absolutely. So, Marvin, let's talk about your background. Let's start with your story first, and then we'll get into the content.
Well, very briefly, I got my degree in accounting and actually was in Chicago for my first, job right out of college with Deloitte, right down on One Wacker Drive. I lived out in Lombard and took the train in, and I thought it was pretty cool at the time, being just out of college and, in the fast lane, so to speak. However, after a few years, the accounting profession didn't offer the kind of vision that I had for myself. And so I was playing pickup basketball with a friend of mine and a group, and we got chatting about our careers and life. And before I knew it, I had turned in my resignation and launched a business with him. And we had a great ride and had a successful run and exit. And then I, started another business that I built a national platform on, and a few years ago exited that business and lived in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time and moved up to the Sierra foothills, which is on the way to Lake Tahoe. We almost lost Lake Tahoe here a few weeks ago with all the fires here in Northern California, but fortunately they were able to stop it. But I moved up here just, kind of living the entrepreneur's dream where I thought I would just, take it easy and coast. And I very quickly figured out that once you have the pedal to the metal going 90 miles an hour, when you are in the slow lane or even parked on the side of the road, life gets pretty boring. So I got to thinking about my exit experience. And, I figured if I had known a lot more, been a little bit more dialed in the exit process, although I'd had other exits, but they were much smaller in scale. And this last one, if I'd have been more dialed in, I would have done a lot better. And so I got to thinking about that, and I started a podcast really focused on providing insights to what you need to know to step away from your business and exit profitably.
Absolutely. And there's some great stories indeed. And I know that this is a passion of yours, and Pack Your Parachute, I know, is an exciting book where you're putting together the key strategies behind successful and profitable business exits, but also a training as well. So you've utilized all of those experiences that you just talked about, and now you're helping entrepreneurs to create that monetization event of their business by focusing on all of the metrics. So you've been hosting the podcast. So how long have you been doing this? And tell us about some of the guests that you've had on the show.
It's coming up 3 years now. And the fascinating thing about the podcast is that instead of talking to individual entrepreneurs that go through an exit and what their takeaways are from their exit, these are the actual people that make the deals. And they have a portfolio of hundreds of exits. And so they're able to cherry pick the ones that went really well, were home runs for the entrepreneur and why, and some that kind of blew up, went sideways in the middle of the deal and why, and some real tragic stories. Entrepreneurs dropped the ball and ended up not exiting and actually either going bankrupt or closing their business. And the thing is that all of this is preventable in 99% of the cases if you understand the process and you can connect the dots and have a game plan in place. You can exit on the top of the pile instead of on the way up or on the way down.
And generally speaking, is there Are industries different when you're talking about exit, or generally speaking, are the same principles true of all industries and maybe even all business sizes?
Well, three questions there, really. Yes, all there is a process that is universal uh, that apply virtually to all businesses. Exits are different based on size because the buyers are different. Who is going to be interested in a business that's doing $1 million a year versus one that's doing 10 million or 50 million? They're different type of buyers that come to the table for those different level of businesses. And then within the universe of types of businesses, there's certainly different metrics, different uh, dynamics that drive acquisitions and sales within different types of businesses, from tech to service to things that are heavily asset-based businesses. They're different types of buyers. So the principles are the same, but how the deals happen tend to be different.
Very interesting, very, very helpful. And so, for our small business owners that are listening to this program, what is that one bit of advice that you would want to see them put into practice this week that can help them with their future business, as you say, that business exit?
Well, what happens 90% of the time is that entrepreneurs, small business folks, regardless of the size of the business, generally have their nose to the grindstone. They're in the trenches. They're pedaling as hard as they can, putting out fires on a day-to-day basis, and they just don't have time to think about, gee, someday I'm going to have to exit this business, and that's a huge mistake. You should take some time to actually start thinking about it. And so the almost the universal reason business exits and sales don't happen as well as they should is that there hasn't been enough forethought, and people put it off to the last minute because exits tend to be event driven when you don't have a plan. And so someone gets sick, there's a family illness, a death, a problem with a partner, a competitor enters the market, something that is totally unexpected because things are going along just fine, and you haven't given it any thought. So it's a fire drill. You're rushing to the exit, and those type of circumstances and challenges that are presented in that type of scenario can end really badly. And so
And
the one universal truth is that you need to think about it in advance, get started in advance. That doesn't mean you're going to have the total playbook in place, but you need to have a playbook.
absolutely. And again, I've been chatting with Marvin Storm, the business exit guru and the host of Business Exit Stories. And Marvin, we teased this earlier, and I have to deliver for our listeners. What is the most unusual, the craziest story that you've heard from some of your guests on the show? And of course, I do want to make sure that our listeners don't take your word for it, that they actually get on the podcast and they actually start tuning in themselves. But what's the craziest story?
I'm going to share two. One great one where someone was getting ready for an exit, and he was able to surround himself with some good advisors, and he sold it for literally 20 times what he even his wildest imaginations thought it would happen, because the right things were done and the right buyers brought to the table. And on the converse flip side of that is someone that was going to exit for millions of dollars, dropped the ball in the exit process and ended up going out of business before business got sold. And both that last story, it was totally preventable. But sometimes entrepreneurs believe their own press clippings and think they're a little bit smarter than they are.
I hear that. Marvin Storm, how can people get a hold of you and subscribe to the podcast?
Well, it's businessexitstories.com. I do have a report that I get a lot of feedback, kind of what is the kind of the game plan here. So I developed a report, and if anyone wants it, they just go to businessexitstories.com/report, and they can download it there. And I can honestly say that some of the stories are very relevant for the people listening to your podcast that have businesses, because everyone is eventually going to exit their business, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. I appreciate it. And again, I encourage all of our listeners to get on your website, subscribe to the podcast, Business Exit Stories. Marvin Storm, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's been delightful. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Coming after the break, we've got more small business jobs and entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about professional development and have yet another guest on the program. But first, we've got headlines, some quick announcements. And again, we'll be back. Be sure to get on my website, shalomklein.com. That's where you can download past 8+ years of shows all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.